Lee Summit is your destination for big city vibes and small town charm.
Head to the downtown Lee Summit Farmers Market, where local meets fresh. Then grab a cup of coffee and discover a variety of shops and boutiques just around the corner. Continue the fun in downtown Lee Summit at a retro arcade bar. Discover your new beer at one of our 6 locally owned breweries. Cool off with some handcrafted cocktails at happy hour. End the night with live music and good company. Lee Summit, Missouri.
I'm Assistant Chief Jim Eden.
And I'm Battalion Chief Ben Hicks.
And today we're at Lee Summit Fire Station 3. Fire Station 3 was part of the 2016 no tax increase general obligation bond for public safety initiatives. The station was built and occupied in August of 2020. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we've not been able to give tours or have an actual ribbon cutting. So we want to invite you in today to give you the opportunity to see what goes on within a Lee Summit Fire Department station.
Let's go take a tour. This is our admin side of the facility. We use this side mainly for offices. We have a lot of work during the day, whether it's training or doing reports or just generally taking care of the shift that we need to do. At this particular station, Station 3, we do have an assistant chief that works out of here. That person has their own office where they need to manage what's going on throughout the day with the shift and staffing, and as well as running calls out of here. The captain has their own office as well. What the captain does is at this specific station is in charge of both the fire truck that's here as well as the ambulance. And so with all those personnel responsibilities as well as running calls and reports, that's where they work out of. And generally for the rest of the crew, which is somewhere around 5 to 6 individuals, we have rooms to write reports, and we have additional training rooms and other rooms where people can work. Walking into our living area, I think it's important to recognize that we work 48-hour shifts. So in the evenings, after 5 o'clock, after work is done, we may have the opportunity to catch a game or something else as long as we're not running calls. And this gives us the opportunity to do that. When we go into our kitchen, I think this gives you a great reason to know why we go to the grocery store. When you see fire trucks at the grocery store, what we're doing. Well, so for 2 days working for 48 hours, we buy all our meals at the grocery store, and then we come in here and cook. Just like you guys do at home. So everybody has their own fridge on each shift as well as their own pantry, and then we cook those meals here. Going into the sleeping side of things, we've got a couple different things that are significant. We have our own laundry room, which again is important when we're here for 48 hours. The opportunity to wash and clean our clothes and bedding is very important for hygiene. And walking into where our beds are, we keep the kind of sleeping quarters over on one side of the building. It gives us both easy access out to where our fire apparatus are, as well as kind of keeping it a little bit quieter for those people that have been up all night running calls. We have 11 bedrooms here at this station, and the reason we built it with so many bedrooms is we want to give ourselves as a city the opportunity to expand. So if we need to put another apparatus here or numerous other people working at this station, that's already in place as far as infrastructure goes, and we don't need to go back and try to make it bigger or better, and that's really important for us, especially because the old station was so small. Back out on the apparatus floor, we have doors facilitated as many places as possible, so that way when we're sleeping at night and a call comes out, we can make our way out fairly quickly to get out onto the truck if we need to and run a call. On the other side of the station, we kind of have other stuff that we may want to keep separated if we want to. Physical fitness is very important to us as firefighters. So in order to better ourselves and make sure we're as healthy as we can to do this job, we have our own gym facility here that we kind of go throughout the day when we can and get an opportunity to come in and work out. Our goal when we run calls, when we get back to the station after calls, our goal is to get ready to go back as soon as we can to run another call. So we have the opportunity or capability here to fill up our air tanks. You can see firefighters wear the big air tanks on their backs, and they use those in a fire. We can come back and fill those up and make sure that we're ready to go again when we're wanting to go run another call. We have our own workshop here. We work on a lot of our tools and making sure that everything's clean and operational, and this gives us the capability to do that, again, to make sure that we have everything we need and we're as capable as we can be running calls throughout the city. Cancer prevention is very important in the fire service right now. Because of that, we have an extractor machine, and what this does is gives us the capability when we come back from a fire, we can put our bunker gear into this machine and get all that really nasty crud off of our gear. Again, kind of getting back to that cancer prevention mode, allowing us to be as clean as we possibly can for the next call. Finally is our bunker gear room. We each have our own individual locker. This gives us the opportunity to store our gear when we're not here working in between shifts, as well as keep a clean extra set on here in case we do run a fire and we need to clean our current gear. Typically, this is where your day starts off at the fire station. You come in and get your gear and put it on wherever you're working that day, and then you end the same way, bring your stuff back to your locker to go home after working. This is Med 3. This ambulance just currently moved into the station from Station 7. Station 3, since we've had it built, has turned into one of our busiest stations in the city. Therefore, we wanted to provide the best care in the closest unit as we could. So we moved one of our ambulances up, and this became Med 3 for this particular instance. Out of this station, we also have Pumper 3. And that's a fire apparatus that they utilize to run the calls on this west end of the city. The last vehicle that you see is the chief's vehicle. We have 2 shift chiefs on shift every day, and they split the city. And this chief running out of this station typically covers the west and south area of the city, while our chief of Station 2 covers kind of that northeast section of our city, and they divide it up evenly.
Thank you for going on a tour with us today. If you have any other questions about the Lee Summit Fire Department, please go to our webpage at lsfire.net or follow us on Facebook at Lee Summit Fire Department.
Thanks for joining us on the tour.
Traditionally, we think as police officers, those responding to law enforcement needs within the community. But honestly, we are there to serve our citizens, and our citizens do go into crisis. They do have mental health crises, and we're being called to those scenes on a regular basis. In order to help serve those citizens better, we did initiate the Crisis Intervention Team Program. These are officers that are specially trained to de-escalate crisis situations. Recently, we've brought co-responders onto the scene, licensed qualified mental health professionals housed within our police department, and they respond with those officers directly to those scenes where a crisis is occurring so they can interact with that citizen and get them the help they need right there on that scene.
The co-responders are either bachelor or master level in a behavioral health related field. They wear plain clothes, they don't carry weapons or anything like that.
I have a police radio that I listen to all day. Listen for, those key words: mental health, behavioral health, crisis.
There's a lot of officers that just call for me. I have my own radio number.
I also have the ability to self-dispatch to them and say 982 is en route.
Officers en route, 914, Armstrong.
So typically I arrive after they've made it safe. I'll make contact and get kind of the rundown, and then I just kind of jump right in.
I'm like, hey, my name's Allison. I'm a mental health professional. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to take you to jail or arrest you.
Sometimes all a person needs is a voice, someone neutral, someone outside that, can listen. I do a lot of safety planning, including family, their support network, who's close to you. If they're home alone, who can come over and hang out with you today? Can we lock away your sharps? Can we put up your meds? Do you need meds? Can we get you over to the urgent care to get you assessed for your medications? Some of them also are like, oh, I'm so glad you came. This made me feel so much better.
Our main goal as the co-responders is to, one, get people connected to the services that they need, and also divert from emergency rooms and jails.
And they almost get a different view of the police responding. That lets me know you care and the officers care.
Please, how can we help you?
My husband has...
In 2020, we had 722 mental health related calls for service. 2022, by that time, 1,479. These mental health related calls for service are increasing. How we're responding to that is increasing the number of crisis intervention team officers we have available, as well as the number of co-responders we have available to respond on these calls.
So what I think is important for the community to know about the co-responder program is that we're here, we exist. All you have to do when you call 911 is ask for us. Say, hey, I want a co-responder to respond to this crisis, and we'll go. I was really struggling about 8 years ago on my personal journey with mental health, and I met some amazing social workers and amazing programs that have helped me get to where I am today. I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. We want to help, and that's what we love to do.
So I had a client, we got a call, she had some suicidal ideations, and she really felt that she had nobody. And and getting to know her story and getting to know who comes around and sees you, well, then we found a support person and they responded immediately. And we made a plan. I called back and checked on her in an hour, and then I checked on her in 2 hours. We were able to get her into the additional services to where she talks to someone every week or more. I just took a person that really just thought they had nobody and nobody would show up for them, and show them you do. And you'll be amazed who is in your corner if you just simply say, I need a little help.
It's extremely rewarding overall. Just the fact of working with other council people and other volunteer commission members that are so involved and care so much about making this community better. It sort of kind of lifts your own spirits by being involved in that kind of environment with other people like that. For many years, I was a typical resident, raising a family, going to work, in many cases leaving the city for employment, and went through a leadership class through the chamber, learned a lot about our city and learned about all the great amenities and resources we have, and was asked if I was interested in volunteering on a commission. I said yes, and kind of the rest is history. I've just completed my third year on city council, and so looking forward to finishing strong with this first term, and look forward to continuing to serve this community. My thing is that there's so many talented people in this community that believe in so many different initiatives, and for me, one of the big reasons why I decided to run was that as a residential taxpayer, I felt that we can always increase the business tax base of our community, and that's kind of been a big part of my involvement on city council, is to encourage and promote and make it easier for development to occur, commercial development to occur in our community, to increase that tax base and diversify that tax base. And so I think we've made significant strides the last few years. We've had a collective great group of council members and mayor where we've really truly accomplished a lot of things that there were somewhat kind of stumbling blocks for previous councils. Working new contracts with our union personnel, firefighters and police was a big accomplishment for us. The fact that we were able to push along some initiatives like the downtown renovation for a market, a farmer's market. It's been a great experience to be part of those meetings, to help nudge it, and to the point where we have a developer involved is just a great feeling to have been part of that. And others, I mean, I think our park system, we've continued to support our park system to add a new community center, for example, that we negotiated with the Metropolitan Community Colleges. So I'm proud of all those things and just being able to help make a difference in many aspects. I love definitely spending time with my family. We have 3 daughters, and they're all fairly active, in some in sports and other extracurricular activities. But for me, I love being outdoors. I love the trails, I love riding my bike, and I love playing golf. And we have awesome amenities and options within our community to have that kind of a lifestyle. This June will be 25 years that my wife and I have lived in Lee Summit and have raised 3 daughters in this community. I know this city has incredible, talented residents that come from all different walks of life, very diverse group of families in our community, that it's so rewarding to be involved on a government level or some kind of civic commission or committee, that in many cases you get out of it more than you put in, and I truly live by that, and I believe that.
Order the Monday, September 11th, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Here.
Councilmember Lovell,
Here.
Councilmember Pryor.
Here.
Like we have a quorum. First item is the approval of the agenda.
Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. I don't think we have any discussion. Roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
All righty, moving on. Public comments. Anybody know of any public comments?
I'm not aware of any public comments, and I don't present
All right.
public comments.
Good deal. Then we'll go right into the business. First item is 2023-5826, the approval of the August 14th, 2023 Public Works Committee action letter.
Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Lovell.
I move to approve the Public Works Committee action letter, item number 2023-5826.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the August 14th, 2023 Public Works Committee action letter. Roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Thank you. That's approval of the August 14th, 2023 Public Works Committee action letter. Next item, TMP 2761, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 576322-6C for the stormwater improvements Phase 2 to Legacy Underground Construction, Inc. in the amount of $1,167,971.10 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same. Karen Quackenbush.
Good evening, Karen Quackenbush, Senior Staff Engineer. This agenda item is for the construction of Phase 2 stormwater improvements as designed by Lamper Nearson, advertised publicly on August 1st, 2024 in accordance with local policies and state statutes. 3 bids were received, and Legacy Underground Construction was found to be the lowest and responsible bidder. Primary components of the improvements include upsizing of the public storm sewer system and mass grading at 3 separate sites: Northwest Ponderosa Street, Northeast Country Lane, and Northeast Arlington Circles. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions? Applicant for the presenter? Being none. I noticed we have I think a 90-day, is it 90-day project term?
So there are 3 milestones for the project. For all 3, each site has a separate milestone. So we give the contractor calendar days for each site. On Ponderosa, he has 60 days. On Country Lane, he has 90 days. And on Arlington Circle, he has 150 days. So once he starts at a particular site, he then is expected to meet substantial within those calendar days for those 3 milestones.
Do we, or I guess we have probably, have we already had discussions with the residents in these 3 instances?
Yes.
And there's no conflicts or anything?
Everybody is comfortable with those days that we're giving the contractor. They're all aware. We also identified in the agreement that potentially work could begin on Ponderosa this fall, and the residents are happy with that. As far as the other 2 sites, Country Lane and Arlington Circle, we anticipate a start date of March 1, just to allow winter weather to clear up. They can work prior to March 1 with the understanding that they still, once they start, those calendar days start ticking away.
I have one more question, and this may be routine also. I drove by the Country Lane location. Will that affect? And actually, and the reason I thought of this question, I saw a bus coming by there at the same time I was. Do we know? Will it affect the bus routes? And I'm a little concerned that the bus driver will be surprised if they pull down there and they've got
If
construction.
they pull
going.
down and there's construction. So we are crossing Country Lane with the improvements, and we have provided a detour map
Okay.
for the contractor, and the contractor will put up signs detouring folks around that corner, and they can utilize the other streets in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I've never tried.
I'm glad you brought that up, because certainly we could reach out to LSR 7 in the transportation department and make them aware when the construction is about to start. We do notify the residents, but they are probably equally an important individual to be made aware of the construction activity.
I've never attempted to drive a bus forward, let alone back one up when you're in a tight spot. And of course, there's cars on the street, and it would be very tough. So, yeah. Oh,
yeah, Chairman DeMauro, is just standard practice when we do those kind of closures as part of the construction job. There are notices that we send out to what we consider service providers. On that list is LSR 7 transportation. So we give that notice to them. We just have a direct email contact that we send to all those kind of providers to make them aware as that date comes closer.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anybody in here? I've exhausted my question. Anybody else have any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Karen. I would look for a motion. Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you. I move to forward ordinance number TMP 2761 to council for approval, and ordinance awarding the bid for project number 576322-6C for the stormwater improvements phase 2 to Legacy Underground Construction, Inc. in the amount of $1,167,971.10, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second, moving TMP 2761, the full council with a recommendation of approval. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
Thank you. That's a unanimous vote. Next up, TMP 2769, an ordinance approving modification number 5 to an agreement dated July 16th, 2019 for professional engineering services for 4 stormwater improvement projects: Southwest Blazing Star Drive, Southwest 34th Street, Northeast Delta School Road, Southwest Pennell Drive, and between the city of Lee Summit, Missouri, and Lamp-Reinerson for an increase of $24,314.68, with an amended not to exceed amount of $379,714.68, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same. Karen Quackenbush.
Thank you. So when the contractor submits different submittals to install the improvements, every one of those need to be reviewed. And it is necessary to have Lamp-Reinerson do the review of those submittals to ensure that everything is in accordance with the plans and the specifications. This agreement will allow them to perform that work, and will also allow them to perform other construction services like site visits, requests for additional information, final record drawings that'll be submitted to the city. I did want to point out that modification number 5, just to provide some clarification on the naming of these sites, and the fact that the agreement is with Blazing Star and 34th and Delta School and Pennell. And then you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were doing Arlington Circle and the other two. And so I just wanted to clarify that originally Lamp-Reinerson was contracted with us to do those 4 sites back in 2020. And we were very pleased with what they had done with the design of those 4 sites. And these 3 sites are very similar in nature as far as the design of the improvements to mitigate the structural flooding. So this is modification number 5 of that original designed, and now they are going to be needed to do the construction services. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Anybody have any questions for Karen? I don't either, Karen. That's pretty straightforward. I'd entertain a motion.
It is a long one. I move to forward ordinance number TMP 2769 to council for approval, an ordinance approving modification number 5 to an agreement dated July 16, 2019, RFQ number 543-32272 for professional engineering services for four stormwater improvement projects: Southwest Blazing Star Drive, Southwest 34th Street, Northeast Delta School Road, Southwest Pennell Drive, by and between the city of Lee Summit, Missouri, and Lamp Ryan-Earson for an increase of $24,314.68 with an amended not-to-exceed amount of $379,714.68 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Second.
That was a recommendation for approval, right? Approving it, right? That's okay. I just want to get that on the record. Thank you. I have a motion and a second to move TMP 2769 with a recommendation approval to the full council. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
It's a unanimous vote, moving TMP 2769 to the full council. Next up, TMP 2774, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an agreement for easement, notice, and covenant running with land with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources Waste Management Program to grant access to monitoring points and perform inspections, and authorizing the mayor to execute the same. Dave Lowe.
Hi, Dave Lowe, engineering manager. And this is kind of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources language that you just read. But in simple terms, this is to grant an access easement for MDNR to go into the landfill, the closed landfill, and do testing or they have monitoring wells and things like that. So it's giving them access to do. As part of this, we modified the permit boundary area. There are some areas that were part of the landfill property that aren't really used for the landfill itself, and it eliminated some areas that are now part of the new processing facilities permitted area. So there is a map as part of this, a boundary survey. So anyway, this MDNR is then allowed to do inspections and monitoring. But this easement and closure plat are required by MDNR and to be on file with the county, recorded documents. And at that point in time that these are recorded, we can go enter into the post-closure period. So this is kind of the final step of closure. So questions? I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from the council? So Dave, this just has to do with the improvement of the PDA, the new PDA, that it's spread out, and so the MDNR has to have access.
It's for the they have access through the new
facility.
Processing facility. That's part of their access. Yes, get into the landfill.
All righty, thank you. Seeing no more questions, I would entertain a motion.
Chair.
Yes.
I move to advance to City Council with a recommendation for approval TMP-2774, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an agreement for easement, notice, and covenant running with land with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources Waste Management Program to grant access to monitoring points and perform inspections, and authorizing the mayor to execute the same.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second, moving TMP 2774 to the full council with a recommendation of approval. Roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
That's unanimous, moving TMP 2774 to the full council. Next up, TMP 2722, an ordinance approving modification number 6 to the agreement with Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley, Inc. for an on-call professional planning and engineering services for the airport in the amount of $446,199.28 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same. Mr. Mike Anderson.
Good afternoon, Mike Anderson, Deputy Director of Public Works Operations. This modification is for the design of the terminal building out at the airport. If you recall in previous discussions, the FAA did grant us a design grant for the design of the terminal building. This was kind of put on an agenda a while back, and we decided to hold off on it because generally speaking, I like to take the agreement and the grant agreement together at the same time. Unfortunately, the FAA has yet to release the money to MoDOT to distribute, so we can't get into the grant agreement yet. But I decided the time is right really to move forward with the agreement with CMT. We did get our tentative authorization letter from MoDOT, which essentially authorizes us to go ahead and spend money on this project, and we will be reimbursed for grants with the grant once that grant has been released. Since we're we're getting to the end of the design of Hangar 2 project, to go ahead and it's going to be there's going to be the same team working on the terminal to go ahead and keep that momentum and move forward with the design of the terminal building. And that puts us in a good spot also when it's time to do applications for construction grant. Because what the FAA does like to see is a design and actual bid from contractors when they go ahead and issue those construction grants. So this is just putting us on a timeline to keep things moving so we can get that final design, get bids, and be prepared to put in an application for construction grant as well. I did notice a slight error within the packet and the ordinance that I did want to bring to your attention. One of the whereas clauses indicates that modification 5 with CMT is being processed simultaneously with this. As I indicated, this was kind of pulled off a previous agenda. Modification 5 went forward and was approved by City Council on July 25th. So we will modify the packet and modify the ordinance for when this goes forward to full council. So that's just kind of a bit of a Scrivener's error there. And really, that's about it. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Lovell.
So is this the control tower, or
no, sir?
What's the difference between the terminal and?
This is the terminal building on the east ramp. So this is where will be the permanent home for the FBO facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Questions? Councilmember Pryor.
This is kind of unrelated, but do you have any new information on the control tower?
No, I think last time I reported, we had that little bit of a discrepancy on our number and the FAA's number, and we've submitted the documentation as to how we got that, and we're still waiting for the FAA to kind of go through that and see if we can figure out what the difference is. So we're still kind of waiting.
Okay, and another question, but
Sure.
you posted a video. Somebody posted a video on the social media for the airport.
Okay.
The plane flying in during the Chiefs game or right before the Chiefs game.
This past Thursday.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Who was in that plane?
Well, there was lots. We actually had a really, really good showing of aircraft in. I think we had, maybe 12, 13 big jets from all over the country. We had folks from Texas. We had a lot from Detroit. Probably about 80% of them was from Detroit. We did have a big Saab 2000. That might be the one you're talking about. It actually looked like a small little commuter type aircraft. I think it holds about 50 people. And we parked it over on the east ramp, and about 35 Detroit fans got off of that. But we still treated them real nice.
Yeah. I love seeing the big planes. I just love seeing all the planes
Yeah.
flying, but I love seeing the big ones. Thank you.
Pretty cool. Any other questions? Being none, I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Mike.
Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Love.
Move to advance to the full city council with a recommendation for approval, TMP-2722, an ordinance approving modification number 6 to the agreement with Crawford Murphy and Tilly Incorporated for on-call professional planning and engineering services for the airport. RFQ number 2020-067, the amount of $446,199.28, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Moving TMP 2722 to the full council with recommendation of approval. Roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Moving TMP 2722 to the full council. Next up, 2023-5730, annual stormwater regulatory update. George Binger.
Good evening, George Binger, City Engineer. The purpose of this presentation is, one is to satisfy a permit requirement to present our annual report summary on water quality or MS4 permit to our elected body. And the other is kind of give you an update or talk through some of the things that that the city has to comply with on the regulatory side. And so there's two elements to this. One is talking about the water quality, and then the other regulatory component that we deal with is the flood insurance program that's promoted by FEMA. So the first part, stormwater quality. So this is dealing with pollution, pollutants, pollution control in our system. It falls under the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit. A lot of times the short term is MS4, which you see down at the bottom, municipal separate storm sewer system. So if you hear those two terms, NPDES or MS4, a lot of times they're interchangeable and what that means. So what this is, it's a permit that the city is issued by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And Missouri is given that authority through the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, which was given that authority in 1987 as part of the Clean Water Act amendment. The first Clean Water Act was passed in 1972, and that addressed point source. So that's like a pipe coming out of a factory or a sewage treatment plant. That was the first phase in that. 1987 added what's called non-point source, which is stormwater. So that's basically, it could be coming from anywhere. It could be sheet flow, it could be a stream, it could be coming off people's yards, just general runoff. So that's what's governed by this permit. So then the city is issued a 5-year permit, and that allows us to operate our stormwater collection system through this permit. Now, as part of that permit, we have to have a stormwater management plan, which we have developed, and that is on our Public Works webpage for public viewing. We have to keep records, and then we have to submit reports. So that's part of the reporting is what we're discussing this evening. So what do we report on? What do we regulate? The MS4 permit covers 6 minimum control measures, or MCMs is the common term. The first one is public education and outreach, and in the packet you'll see like a 2-page summary report, and that kind of summarizes, our public engagement, like with stormwater stenciling program, reaching out to scouting groups or other public interest groups, or letters that we send out to or other social media efforts with that. And then the public involvement and participation is very closely related to that. The illicit discharge detection and elimination, that's an extreme example is somebody dumping oil down a storm drain, or years ago when we had the CK had a leak, or CK Enterprise had a leak, and so we had green dyes flowing into a creek, discoloring a creek. So that's what we're looking at for that. The other thing that you'll see in here is, like, in the wintertime, we go through, when it's low flow, we'll walk the creeks, and we try to inspect 5 to 10% of these pipes going into a creek every year. So if it's dry, water's coming out of a stormwater pipe, that something is going into that system that shouldn't be. So that's part of our annual inspection program, and so that's something we have to report on. One that people are probably takes most of the effort, or more familiar with, is construction stormwater runoff control. That is governed by this permit, MDNR land disturbance permits, as well as our erosion control ordinance. So that's things like the silt fence, the inlet protection, trying to keep that soil and material on site from leaving the site. So that is one of our control measures. Then we get into the post-construction stormwater management. A lot of that is in our UDO and some of our regulations, things like where we have a stormwater management plan, landscaping plans, land use planning, where we're trying to, how can we, reduce the risk of pollution in the future through those efforts. And then that last one, pollution prevention and housekeeping, that is more of an internal. That's where our staff will do internal inspections, like we'll go to a fire station and make sure they've got proper containment, on site, the hazardous materials in the appropriate lockers and drainage. City hall, maintenance shops, things of that nature. So that's more of an internal control measure. And so we monitor those activities. Our permit spells out what our goal and how we intend to address those. And so that's what goes into this report. What's included in the packet is the 2-page summary report that has those activities. And then a requirement is we have to present this to the elected body. Normally, in the past couple of years, it's basically been a staff roundtable where we'll basically hold up and say, this is a report being submitted, for your review. We just want to take the opportunity this year to kind of talk through some of the regulatory stuff at this here at committee. Okay, the other regulatory branch that we get into is the flood insurance program. It's basically taught as a three-legged stool. So this is where we get into our floodplain mapping, and this is where we have our floodway and floodplains mapped. In our development ordinances, we have a floodplain overlay district that shows all of these maps. So basically, if somebody comes in and they're wanting to put a house in a floodplain, they have to comply with the requirements for that. And then normally, what we do is we don't allow new building or new construction in a floodplain area, but sometimes maybe somebody's doing some earthwork where they want to elevate and change the topography, and they want to place fill in the floodplain. That has to be regulated by a permit. Things where we come in and we have a floodway or a stream, we're coming in, we're putting a bridge across it, or maybe a temporary low water crossing. We have to do a study. That has to be permitted. Typically, we have a no-rise condition, or in some cases, we're remapping. In the past, this mapping is, generally where we get most of the questions, because one of the requirements when somebody purchases a house is they have to have a certification that they're either in or out of a mapped flood hazard. That requirement is enforced by the mortgage company. So if there's no mortgage, that necessarily doesn't have to happen. But the mortgage companies are responsible to enforce that. So if a person's purchasing a home and they're in a flood hazard, they're required to have flood insurance. The transition over the last 5 years is the funding for the federal subsidies has gone away. So now people are paying the full actuarial rates. So sometimes we have residents calling us and they've got a $10,000 per year policy for flood insurance based on that location. So part of that is that mapping will identify that. So hopefully, going forward, we can prevent or better manage the building construction of those areas. And then things that we've done in the past too is when these maps change, FEMA doesn't always update the map to our current condition. An example being, we build a road, we put in a culvert, it's a larger culvert, more water passes under the road, we reduce the flooding, but at that time, we built it as a no-rise. Basically, we're showing no harm caused. Then a couple years later, FEMA came through, updated the maps, and now the floodplain area was much larger and put homes in that area. So we've gone back in that situation, and we can do a letter of map revision where we conduct a detailed study. We have a consulting firm will model the rainfall, the flooding, incorporate the new culvert, do a topographic survey so we get the land use in that area, and we can remap that. And by doing that, we've been able to pull some homes out of floodplains doing that. One of our recent projects was on Lee Drive, where we replaced the culvert, Cedar Creek going under Ward Road near Longview Road. That project pulled 4 properties out of the floodplain because of upsizing the culvert and the city remapping that. So that's that mapping component that we get into in that regulatory part. That also, I talked about mitigating the risk. That's the other part. That's the permitting. That's where we review potential applications. That's where there's certain regulations for placing fill in a floodway, the no-rise certificates in working in that area. And then the last component is insure the risk, and that's basically what the property owners have to, That's their one of the elements that comes into that. Now, one of the things we've done as the city is we presented to council and received the guidance and direction to go ahead to join the community rating system. Now, this is a voluntary program that falls under the flood insurance program, where if the city goes above and beyond the minimum regulations, we get credit for that. Now, it's a level 1 through 10, where 10 being the lowest level of going above and beyond, which has a 0% discount on your insurance. We're at a level 9, so entering the program level 9, we're looking at a 5% discount. And basically what we were doing is we're taking credit for things we are already doing as a city. An example being our Code of Ordinances requires that all buildings be built with the freeboard, where the lowest building elevation is 2 feet above the floodwater surface. So by requiring that 2 feet, we get points for that towards a discount on insurance. Currently, staff is trying to work towards getting to that next level, level 8, which would equate to a 10% discount. Part of that in your packet is a substantial damage plan, where by going through that, we accumulate certain points that move us toward that. And so as we accumulate more points, we move down the system. Now we can increase that discount on insurance premiums. And again, this is not really incurring additional requirements. It's just trying to take credit for things we're already doing. It's just a matter of time of working through this process. So that substantial damage plan, which we presented in here, what we've learned is going through this is we're the first city in the state that has actually developed a substantial damage plan of this nature. A lot of the credit on this goes to Kara Starlin, who's our environmental coordinator. She wrote the plan, coordinated with the various departments, and she also serves on the board for the Missouri State Floodplain Managers Association. She's a certified floodplain manager, and she serves on that state board as the Region 1 or Northwest Region Director. So she did the bulk of the work on this, and what this substantial damage accounts for, and this is defined in the federal regulations. If a house suffers 50%, if the structure suffers 50% or more, and basically if the repair cost is 50% of the value of the structure, that structure has to be brought up to the new code. So if the house was previously built in a floodplain before it was mapped, it floods, it has 75% damage, that house has to be elevated so it is no longer prone to flooding. That's not very common here in the city. Typically, we haven't had any cases where we've reached that 50% damage, but that's a requirement in this plan. So when there's a flood, or if there's any event, a tornado, windstorm that causes damage to a home in the floodplain, city staff will go out and inspect it, evaluate the damage, and record that as an estimated damage. And so that's what part of this plan covers, is how we go through that process. Again, by going through this plan, we're working towards lowering that with a CRS. Now this is kind of common too, like when there's substantial improvements, like when you get into the building codes, if somebody has an old home and they're wanting to do a massive remodel on it, they'll have to bring it up to current electric codes, plumbing codes, and things of that nature. So this is kind of emulating that, but it's addressed more to mitigating flood hazards. So those are the two main regulatory components we have at this point. Just kind of a very quick overview. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and comment that MD&R report will be forwarded to City Council as a staff roundtable item, just as a written report.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Any questions? I do have a couple, and that is how often does the floodplain map redrawn? Do we have to notify them that we see a change?
Yes, the flood map revision process follows the federal public review process. Now, the last updates were in 2017. Before that, it was 2007. It's our understanding that those are in the process of being reviewed, and we may be looking at 2025 as a potential timeline for new maps being published. Now, when those maps are published, there's a public review period. And so that's the time to comment. Typically, when those have come out in the past, city staff has gone in and commented and reviewed on that. One of the big concerns we have looking at some of the proposed mapping is rainfall data. Currently, one of the main rain gauges observed here in Lee Summit is at the airport. And that rain gauge is representing like 65 square miles for the city. And then the other where they're pulling data for the National Weather Service. So that's an issue of trying to get accurate rainfall data. And then the other is the accurate topographic data. A lot of the maps when they're redone, FEMA is just, they're looking at a USGS topographic map, just quad map or aerial image, and they're just plotting over that, and they're just plotting that and modeling that. So they miss things like they'll miss new culverts or new bridges or possibly new subdivisions that go in. They'll miss detention basins. So when we see that, those are things that we as staff will go in and comment on as this needs to be included. When those maps get published, there's generally they're published by a certain day. Then what will happen is the city has so many months to adopt the new maps to be compliant with the flood insurance program. And if the city does not adopt the new maps, then we're no longer compliant. But that's where in 2017, when the new maps were adopted, that's where we went back and we looked at some of these places. Where can the city go in and do a letter of map revision to change it? Sometimes that helps. Now there's a cost for doing that because of the engineering study that goes with that, and then there's an application fee with FEMA that goes with that. But we found that trying to get properties out of a map flood hazard, I mean, there's definite benefit to that. There's a definite public benefit there.
Yeah, because a few of the items that we actually approved just a few minutes ago could substantially change the floodplain. I mean, with the upsizing of all the pipes and everything, that's going to, a couple of locations that I'm very aware of, I mean, that's substantially going to change the floodplain, I assume.
In some cases, yes, and others, no. Many of the properties that we deal with through the stormwater capital projects are not in map flood hazard areas, because those are areas that we've kind of put on a low priority because it's such a massive undertaking or effort. Now, Country Lane, which is in the Vista Dirty Ditch or East Fork Little Blue River, is a little different because we have homes where there's known structural flooding. We know there's some inlet capacity issues where water is bypassing inlets. So the homes are kind of flooding from two directions. There's the lack of infrastructure, but there's also the creek. So since we have the lack of infrastructure, that kind of has a direct connection where we can go in, and part of that project is floodplain benching, and part of that is we're remapping the floodplain in that area, part of that project. So it's rare when we get into that. Lee Drive is an example where we were able to remap because we had infrastructure that was, it just wasn't there. We didn't have a stormwater collection system there along Lee Drive and Ward Road. But if we're there, we might, we don't want to go and do a project and still have flooding after the fact. So when we look at it, the upsizing the culvert was really what we needed to do to mitigate the flooding in that area. Same thing with the Country Lane area is really, we need to do some work in the stream channel. So those are the first two we're really getting into on that. Our roadway projects, we always look at the stream crossings because if we're crossing a stream, it's a floodway, what we're dealing with. An example being like in Chipman Road, west of the Rock Island line there, when that bridge was installed in 2009, the bridge was elevated and then a bench was cut under the bridge to allow the water to pass under the bridge. But at a time we didn't remap it because we anticipated the road project coming along within a couple of years, and here we are 13 years later and we're under construction finally.
Well, speaking specifically of the Country Lane location, is that going to increase the flooding in McKee Park? You know how when it rains, McKee Park always comes out of its, the stream bank always comes out of the bank and floods the path and everything?
Generally, no, it will not affect that because when we do a map revision, we have to go upstream until we match the current map. Current model, we have to go downstream till we match. And with the models that we have now, that McKee Park is far enough away that it's not impacted by this project.
And what happens if somebody does buy a piece of land in a floodplain and they decide to raise the level of the topography? And of course, they're going to have to buy insurance probably. How is the flood insurance calculated before they build the house? Or is that mortgage company say yes or no? We'll loan you money to build or not?
What's commonly done in that, FEMA has a process called a letter of map revision based on fill, or LOMAR-F. And so the engineer will go in and evaluate that. They'll look at the floodplain. Generally, it's placing fill to where they're elevating the structure 2 feet above, or the ground 2 feet above the floodwater elevation. So by doing that, it actually pulls that property, that structure out of the map flood hazard. So it removes the requirement for insurance. Now, there's some other technical requirements that go into that, because generally if you're doing that, you don't want to put a basement back in that location, like a slab on grade, or elevate higher, or move the structure far enough away to where you're not going to get that water infiltration. But fill is typically done through a map revision to actually pull that parcel out of the map flood hazard area.
Man, it seems like I've asked this question before years ago, and that is it the mortgage company's responsibility to let the homeowner know that they're out of the floodplain? Or how does the homeowner know he's either entered the floodplain or he's out of the floodplain?
If there's a mortgage on the property, they will do a certification that tells them they're in or out when they get that initial mortgage. Now, if the homeowner does work or elevates the structure or wants to do a letter of map amendment or map revision, that's the responsibility of the homeowner to go through that process to prove that they are no longer in a floodplain.
And then if they don't have a mortgage, I guess it gets to them somehow that they're in or out, whether or not,
Well, if they don't have a mortgage, they're not required to have flood insurance.
Right. That's what I mean. It's a kind of a null.
Well, FEMA still recommends flood insurance, and even for people who are not in the floodplain, because over a third of the flood claims are people who are not in the map flood hazard area. And generally the rates outside the flood hazard area are much lower. They're generally very affordable in that situation. And that just deals with the unpredictability of stormwater in that situation. So Lee Summit is fortunate that most of what we deal with is flash flooding, because what you see a lot of the issues when you look at across the country, even across the state, you're dealing with people that are like along the Missouri River or along the Gulf Coast or a sea coast where there's just, they have water that, or very flat, like, you see places in like Texas and Louisiana, like along some of these large rivers where the entire community or 3/4 of the community will be under 3 feet of water for 2 or 3 days. And so you see some of that. So you look at some of these maps in other areas, it's a lot bigger than what we see here. But then with the flash flooding, you have the current flowing through. So that can cause more damage sometimes than just standing water.
Thank you, George. Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. Are there ever times where a house is not in the floodplain, and then whenever you guys do the reassessment or reevaluate it, they are suddenly in a floodplain? And what causes that, if there are?
To my knowledge, thus far, when the city has done that type of study, we have not found a home that gets moved into a floodplain. It's generally when FEMA is doing those updates, because they're either changing like the rainfall data. What we're seeing, the trend in 2014, there was a significant increase in the amount of rainfall used in the models. And that's expected to go up again here in the next couple of years. And so when you add more rain to the same land, it tends to expand the footprint of that flood hazard. And so when that happens, those homes are considered to be in a floodplain. And then they will typically, some homeowners get notified by the mortgage company. Sometimes only get notified like if they're trying to refinance. And then other times people, they see the map or, I mean, one of the things that we do as staff is we look at those maps and we'll send letters to people saying you are in or you are close to a flood hazard. And we send those letters out every year. And I think right now we're tracking about 114 properties that are in the floodplain. So with that, we send those letters out. So if that map changes, people will get notified that way through that letter. And they have it, and again, we have some resources and information on our website. They're more than welcome to call the Public Works, and we can kind of help get people started on that process on, if there's an appeal. And then if there's an appeal or they want to do the map revision or map amendment. But then we also, every year we're doing the capital improvement plan, we look at these issues. And okay, what's next? Because Karen was up here presenting that project. I mean, I think we started with 26 projects in 2018, and they're all under design or construction at this point. Well, if somebody submits another letter saying they're flooding, and we identify that, that's where we can go back and evaluate our capital program.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Well, thank you, George. It's very interesting, and then we'll just, of course, you don't need any action. We'll just wait for the summary report as an item on the council agenda. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that leads us into roundtable. Do we have any roundtable items? Councilmember Pryor.
Okay, so I was wondering in regards to, and I asked this earlier in the legislative meeting, in regards to the Highway Patrol building, since Troop A covers so many counties, has there been any discussion with any of the other counties or cities and helping cover some of the costs that Lee Summit putting into the project to relocate Troop A?
I'm not aware of any conversations in that regard. No, when we came to agreement with the Office of Administration for the relocation of Troop A, we set our cap. So we have our financial contribution. Any monies above that are the state's responsibility. And at this point, we believe it's fully funded. Troop A has told us that they have their money to relocate. So I think they may have had their own conversations when they were short before the state's budget had appropriated additional funds to complete the relocation of the headquarters itself. I understand that they're still seeking additional funds for their firing range. I'm not aware of any conversations that they had reached out to other districts, other troops, or other parties to help participate in bridging that funding gap.
Yeah, not necessarily other troops, just other cities or counties that they cover is what I was wondering. But yeah, okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Any roundtable from the staff?
Just bring up a couple of dates. I know you were already sent information, but we have a public meeting for 29150, the Troop A relocation, but the interchange job itself, the highway reconstruction and outer road relocation, that's on October 3rd. There's been an announcement for that publicly. It will be held in this room. That's Tuesday, October 3rd, 4:30 to 7. It's kind of an open house style format. Public's invited to come drop by, see the exhibits, talk to MoDOT staff, city staff, and the engineering consultant responsible for design, answer their questions. This is just another step in the federal aid partially funded project where we gather that public feedback. There's no action taken by the elected body or anything. It's just a public hearing in the sense of it's a public view of the project itself. So they're invited to come attend. Hopefully they see some of those announcements. And then I know you were all invited by the Chamber of Commerce to attend the processing facility ribbon cutting. Just as a reminder, that's on September 28th. That's a Thursday at 2 o'clock on site out there at the Resource Recovery Park. So hopefully some of you can attend. And then lastly, this is our snow rodeo week. So lucky it's not so cold. Our precipitation outside is not freezing. And I know, Chairman DeMauro, you've got signed up. You're going to come out and drive. Yep. Just still that invitation is standing. If anybody else would like to, we have plenty of opportunity. If you'd like to come out.
You're the only one that's
I don't know. I am for sure aware, though, that Chairman DeMauro is signed up. I believe you're at in the morning Friday. So we'll be out there. And if you have family you want to bring them. They're invited. So absolutely. I know Councilmember Pryor, your husband came out, right? So
Yeah, I think he does it every year, but I took one or two of my kids last year. It was fun.
Yeah.
They had fun.
so anyway, it's
watching.
a standing invitation. Always, we got lots of opportunity if you'd like to show up.
All right, thank you, Michael. Any other staff roundtable from anybody? And another date reminder, our next Public Works meeting will be October 9th at 4:30 p.m. in the chamber. So that leads me to adjourn. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.